Your soulmate loves you so much. But another woman is still in the picture. The silence felt heavier than any spoken confession. Not because love had disappeared, but because love had become trapped inside impossible choices. Far away, someone sat alone in a dimly lit room, holding a photograph that had never been shown to another soul. Their fingertips slowly traced the edges as though the paper itself carried warmth. Every memory attached to it refused to fade. The picture wasn't perfect. Neither was the story behind it. Yet it represented the one person whose absence echoed louder than every voice surrounding them. They whispered only 4 words into the empty room. I still choose you. No one heard. Not even the woman sitting in the next room. She believed the future already belonged to her. Friends congratulated her. Family members smiled whenever they spoke about upcoming plans. Everyone assumed they understood the story. No one realized they had only read the cover. Deep inside, another chapter remained hidden. One that had never stopped writing itself. Every morning began with routine conversations, polite smiles, shared responsibilities, and carefully rehearsed emotions. From the outside everything appeared stable. Inside, nothing stood on solid ground. Because genuine affection cannot be forced into forgetting. It quietly survives beneath ordinary days. Sometimes hidden beneath duty. Sometimes buried beneath fear. Sometimes locked away behind promises made for reasons that had nothing to do with love. The other woman wasn't cruel. She wasn't evil. She simply believed she belonged there. She had invested time, hope, patience, and dreams into a future she imagined would eventually blossom. No one had warned her that another heart had silently occupied that space long before she arrived. Meanwhile, across cities separated by countless miles, someone else often paused without understanding why. Certain songs suddenly felt meaningful. Random places stirred unexplained emotions. Dreams repeated unfamiliar faces that somehow felt comforting. An invisible connection refused to disappear. It wasn't magic. It was memory searching for courage. Life continued anyway. Work demanded attention. Responsibilities piled higher. Days passed. Weeks disappeared. Months quietly slipped into history. Yet every accomplishment felt strangely incomplete. There was always an empty seat inside the heart. Not visible. Not spoken about. Simply present. One evening everything almost changed. A casual conversation turned unexpectedly personal. So, a friend asked carefully, "Are you actually happy?" The question sounded simple. The answer wasn't. Silence stretched across several seconds. Eyes wandered toward the window where rain slowly painted silver lines across the glass. Finally, a quiet reply emerged. "I should be." The friend noticed the difference immediately. "That's not what I asked." Another pause. Longer this time. "I care about her." But the unfinished sentence carried more truth than paragraphs ever could. "But you love someone else." No denial came. Only lowered eyes. Sometimes acceptance arrives without words. That single moment became impossible to forget. From then onward, everything changed inside. Nothing changed outside. The engagement discussions continued. Families remained excited. Future plans expanded. Photographers were suggested. Venues discussed. Dates considered. Guests imagined. Smiles exchanged. While behind every smile, a silent goodbye waited. Because pretending becomes exhausting when the heart insists on honesty. Late one night sleep refused to come. Instead, old conversations were reread. Deleted messages regretted. Unsaved numbers remembered perfectly. Questions multiplied. Would reaching out destroy someone else's happiness? Would remaining silent destroy their own? Could one act of honesty repair years of distance? Or would it simply create pain for everyone involved? No answer appeared. Only another sunrise. Across town, the other woman noticed subtle changes. Small things. The delayed replies. The distracted expressions. The absent-minded smiles that appeared while staring nowhere. People in love usually notice details others overlook. She noticed all of them. One afternoon she gently asked, "Is there something you're not telling me?" A heartbeat passed. Then another. No. Technically true. Emotionally false. Because sometimes secrets are not lies. They're fears wearing silence as protection. Days later, an unexpected object fell from the back of an old drawer while searching for unrelated documents. A folded letter. Yellowed with age. Never mailed. Never destroyed. Hands trembled before opening it. Inside, only a few handwritten lines survived. If our paths ever separate, I hope life gives us another chance someday. Until then, I'll carry the version of us that never had the opportunity to exist. No signature. No date. No address. Only truth frozen in ink. The room suddenly felt smaller. Breathing became difficult. Years of emotional walls cracked within seconds. Memories rushed back faster than reason could organize them. A laugh remembered. A promise unfinished. A goodbye that had never felt complete. For the first time, the future no longer seemed certain. Not because love had disappeared, but because buried love had awakened. And once an honest heart begins asking difficult questions, there is no returning to comfortable illusions. Far away, someone else looked up at the night sky for reasons they couldn't explain. A strange feeling whispered through their thoughts. As though somewhere, someone had finally remembered. Morning arrived, but peace did not. The unopened letter remained on the table, its worn edges catching the first rays of sunlight. It seemed ordinary, yet it carried the weight of years that had never truly ended. Some memories grow quieter with time. Others simply wait for the right moment to awaken. That day, every familiar place felt different. The streets looked the same. The voices sounded the same. The responsibilities remained unchanged. But inside, everything had shifted. The heart had started asking questions that the mind could no longer silence. Throughout the day, concentration became impossible. Conversations faded into background noise. Every smile offered to others felt incomplete, as though only half of the soul had arrived. Late in the afternoon, an old friend unexpectedly appeared. "You've changed," the friend said gently. "What do you mean?" "You laugh less. You stare into the distance more. And every time someone mentions your future, your eyes lose their light." There was no immediate answer. Instead, a slow breath escaped. "What if I've confused comfort with happiness?" The friend remained silent, allowing the question to settle naturally. Finally came a quiet reply. "Comfort keeps life steady. Love makes life meaningful. They're not always the same." Those words echoed long after the conversation ended. Elsewhere, the other woman noticed the growing distance. It wasn't dramatic. There were no arguments. No shouting. No betrayal she could point to. Only tiny changes that accumulated like drops of rain before a storm. The messages became shorter. The conversations ended sooner. The smiles no longer reached the eyes. One evening she softly asked, "Are you afraid of our future?" A long silence followed. Then came an unexpected answer. "I'm afraid of hurting someone." She frowned. "Who?" Another silence. This one carried far more weight. "I don't know anymore." Those words lingered between them like an invisible wall. That same night, sleep refused to come. Instead, forgotten memories returned one after another. A shared sunset. An unfinished conversation. A promise spoken years ago beneath a sky filled with stars. "I don't know where life will take us," one voice had once whispered, "but if our paths ever cross again, I hope we recognize each other." Neither had imagined how difficult recognition could become. Time changes appearances. Responsibilities reshape priorities. But certain emotions remain untouched beneath the surface. Days passed. The engagement preparations continued. Families discussed invitations. Friends celebrated upcoming happiness. Everyone believed the ending had already been written. No one realized the story was quietly rewriting itself. Each congratulation felt heavier. Each celebration became another reminder of a decision that no longer felt certain. The heart was beginning to resist. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Simply, persistently. One rainy afternoon, while organizing old belongings, another forgotten memory appeared. A small keepsake. Simple. Almost meaningless to anyone else. Yet the moment it rested in trembling hands, every hidden emotion returned with startling clarity. Some objects don't preserve time. They preserve feelings. Holding it felt like standing between two lives. One built on expectation. The other built on truth that had never been spoken aloud. A single tear slipped unnoticed. Not because of regret. Because of realization. Across another city, someone else experienced an equally strange afternoon. An old melody unexpectedly played inside a quiet cafe. The tune seemed ordinary to everyone else. Yet it instantly unlocked emotions that had slept for years. The coffee grew cold. The world blurred for a moment. A familiar face filled every thought. Not because it had been seen recently. Because it had never truly left. A quiet voice inside whispered, "Why do I still miss someone I haven't spoken to in so long?" No answer arrived. Only an overwhelming certainty that something important was changing somewhere beyond sight. Back home, difficult conversations became unavoidable. The other woman sat across the table, watching carefully. "I need you to tell me the truth." The room felt impossibly quiet. "Even if it hurts." Another deep breath. "I care about you." She nodded. "I know. But..." Again, that unfinished word. She lowered her eyes before asking the question she had feared for weeks. "Is there someone else?" Silence answered first. Then came words barely louder than a whisper. "There has always been someone I never completely let go." The confession landed gently. Yet its impact was enormous. No anger appeared. No accusations followed. Only heartbreaking understanding. Sometimes the loudest pain arrives without raised voices. That evening, both hearts sat alone beneath different skies. Miles apart. Completely unaware that the other was experiencing the same restless emotions. Neither knew what tomorrow would bring. Neither knew whether fate would reunite them or lead them toward acceptance. But one truth had become impossible to ignore. Real love does not disappear simply because life becomes complicated. It waits. It hopes. It quietly survives beneath silence until someone finally finds the courage to choose honesty over fear. And as the stars slowly appeared above the darkening horizon, a decision that had been delayed for years was finally beginning to take shape. The next morning began with an unusual stillness. For the first time in years, pretending felt heavier than telling the truth. The familiar routine unfolded as always. Breakfast was prepared. Messages arrived. Meetings were scheduled. The world continued moving as though nothing had changed. But inside, something had reached its limit. Every step forward felt like walking farther away from an unanswered question. How long can a heart remain silent before silence becomes its own form of dishonesty? That question lingered throughout the day. By evening, the sky turned shades of amber and gray. Standing beside a window, thoughts drifted toward memories that had once seemed impossible to forget. The first conversation. The first shared laugh. The quiet dream spoken without fear. Life had separated those moments, but it had never erased them. Some connections fade with time. Others become stronger simply because they were never given a proper ending. Across another city, someone else experienced the same strange pull. Without planning to, they found themselves walking through an old neighborhood they had not visited in years. Nothing extraordinary had changed. The same trees lined the streets. The same breeze carried familiar scents. Yet every corner whispered echoes of the past. One particular bench caught their attention. Years earlier, two people had sat there talking about impossible dreams. They had promised to remain honest with each other. Life had interrupted that promise. But the memory remained untouched. A quiet smile appeared. "So much has changed," they whispered. "And somehow, I still remember." Meanwhile, preparations for the engagement continued around them. Family members excitedly discussed decorations. Friends suggested music and celebrations. Everyone imagined a joyful beginning. No one noticed the growing uncertainty hidden behind polite smiles. Every congratulation felt like another reminder that a decision made without complete honesty could affect many lives. Love should never be built upon silence. That realization became impossible to ignore. Late that evening, an unexpected conversation began. The other woman entered the room carrying 2 cups of tea. She placed one gently on the table. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, she broke the silence. "I've been thinking." A quiet glance met hers. "I don't want someone who stays because they feel obligated." Those words hung in the air. "I want someone who stays because every part of their heart chooses to." The honesty in her voice carried no anger. Only quiet courage. She continued. "If your heart belongs somewhere else, don't imprison it here." Those words felt heavier than any accusation ever could. Sometimes kindness reveals truths that conflict never can. That night, sleep came only in fragments. Dreams returned. Not dramatic dreams. Simple ones. Walking side by side through peaceful streets. Laughing without effort. Sharing ordinary moments that somehow felt extraordinary. The kind of happiness that asks for nothing except presence. Upon waking, one realization stood above every other thought. The heart had already chosen. Only fear remained undecided. Elsewhere, miles away, someone found an old notebook while cleaning a shelf. Inside were faded pages filled with forgotten reflections. One sentence stood out immediately. "If love is real, I hope it finds the courage to return, not because destiny demands it, but because truth deserves to be spoken." The words were written years ago. Yet they felt strangely connected to the present. Closing the notebook, they looked toward the evening sky. A quiet feeling settled within. Not certainty. Not expectation. Only hope. The following afternoon, a phone rested silently on a desk. Its screen remained dark. One message. One call. One honest conversation. That was all it would take to begin changing everything. Yet courage often arrives slower than longing. The hand reached toward the phone. Then stopped. Fear whispered. "What if it's too late?" Another voice answered from somewhere deeper. "What if it isn't?" The phone remained untouched. But not for long. Outside, gentle rain began to fall. Each drop seemed to wash away another layer of hesitation. Some stories end because people stop caring. Others survive because caring never truly ended. This was one of those stories. A story standing at the edge of a decision that could either heal old wounds or create entirely new ones. Neither outcome was guaranteed. Only one thing had become certain. No matter what happened next, the truth could no longer remain hidden. As the rain continued through the quiet evening, trembling fingers finally picked up the phone. The screen illuminated the room. A familiar name still remained there after all these years. One deep breath. Another. The thumb slowly moved toward the call button. And just before the screen was touched, the phone suddenly rang. It was an incoming call. From the very person whose name had never truly left the heart. The phone continued to ring. Each vibration echoed louder than the last, not because of its sound, but because of what it represented. Years of silence. Unfinished conversations. Questions that had lived without answers. For several seconds, no movement came. The screen glowed in the dim room, displaying a name that had remained hidden inside the heart for far longer than anyone could imagine. Finally, a trembling hand answered. Neither voice spoke. Only quiet breathing traveled through the line. It was strange. After all those years, words seemed too small for everything that had survived between them. At last, a soft voice whispered. "I didn't know if you would answer." A faint smile appeared through tears. "I almost didn't." Another silence followed, not uncomfortable, but full of emotions that neither person knew how to explain. Then came the question that had waited for years. "How have you been?" The answer was simple. "I've been living, but I don't think I've truly been at peace." On the other end of the call, tears quietly formed. So it wasn't only me. No. It never was. For hours they talked. Not about grand promises. Not about fairy tales. They spoke about ordinary life. The difficult days. The missed birthdays. The victories they wished they could have shared. The moments when they almost reached out but stopped because fear convinced them it was too late. Every sentence removed another layer of distance. Every memory reminded them that although time had passed, respect and affection had never disappeared. As night settled outside, one question could no longer be avoided. Is someone else in your life? The room became still. The answer arrived slowly. Yes. The single word carried enormous weight. But I've never stopped wondering what would have happened if we had been brave enough years ago. Neither interrupted. Honesty deserved space. I tried to move forward. I truly did. I wanted everyone around me to be happy. But every important decision felt incomplete because a part of my heart never caught up with the rest of my life. The confession was painful. Yet it was also freeing. Across town, the other woman sat quietly by a window. She had sensed this moment long before it arrived. Sometimes the heart notices endings before the mind accepts them. She wasn't angry. She wasn't bitter. She simply understood that love cannot be forced into existence. She whispered to herself. I deserve someone who chooses me without hesitation. The words hurt. But they also carried dignity. Real love should never require someone to compete for a place in another person's heart. Back on the call, neither person rushed toward impossible conclusions. Instead, they made one promise. No more silence. Whatever happened next would be guided by honesty rather than fear. If their paths truly belonged together, they would move carefully, with respect for everyone involved. If they did not, they would at least know they had finally spoken the truth. That alone felt like lifting a burden carried for years.